Yo, what is going on, guys? Toxico Cereal here, and welcome back to another Brawl Stars video. Today, we are going to be ranking every Brawl Stars Brawler's super. What do I mean by that? Well, this is what I mean. Like, if we remove the super thing from Brawl Stars, how good would this Brawler be? Is this Brawler super good, or is it bad? If they really need a super, or if the Brawler relies on their super. Basically, I think you guys know what I'm trying to say here. Kind of hard, but this is going to be a challenging tier list because a lot of Brawl Stars Brawler supers, they're really needed, and everybody has their own super, but we're going to be talking about ones that I think are essential to the Brawler, and then ones that are just pure useless. Like, this Brawler honestly wouldn't change that much if we remove the super. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. So, starting off with Shelly. Shelly's got a super. It's just a big boom. It is not, I wouldn't say it's essential, but it's like a good super, right? Like, it counters tanks. Shelly's a tank counter. It does a lot of damage, and it's pretty easy to cycle through. She does have a hypercharge, but we're not talking about hypercharge. So for me, I don't think it's an essential super, but I'm going to put it in the decent tier. Like, Shelly is pretty much needed. Next up, we have Nita. And Nita spawns Bruce, a bear with a lot of HP that fights for Nita. Now, without this, Nita is useless. Like, this has to be an essential because it spawns a whole object that Nita relies on. And basically, all her gadgets and star powers rely on her super. So, if they completely took her super out, she'd be a useless brawler. Next up, we have Colt, and Colt, honestly, this one for me is really not that hard. I don't think Colt's super is that punishing. Like, it's good, it opens up the map, deals a lot of damage, but I feel like Colt's punch relies on his main attack, and he has a decent reload speed and can spam out shots. His hypercharge is not that great either. So honestly, I'm going to put it in the mid. It's a good super. I'm not saying any of these supers suck, but it's just how much the Brawler relies on the super. Next up, we have Bull, and Bull's an interesting one because Bull sucks right now. He's always been a bad Brawler. His super is good. The problem is he relies deeply on that Stomper gadget. That is by far the best thing about Bull. Bull's super, though, on its own, kind of sucks. Like, sometimes it's decent for good plays, but most of the time, it goes too far for where you want it. It's only really good in heists. So for me, I'm going to put it in the mid tier as well. This is in no particular order, by the way. I'm just putting it. Next up, we have Brock. And honestly, Brock's hypercharge sucks, but he's got a decent super. It does a lot of damage, and it can be pretty easy to cycle through. But his main attack also punches a decent punch, so I don't think it's that essential. So I'm going to put it in the mid tier as well. Like Brock without his super, I still would feel like it'd be a decent brawler. Next up, we have El Primo, and El Primo is a tank, and he deeply relies on his super. It's one of the best in the game. It has to be essential. Primo, if he could never jump on an enemy, he could never cycle it and stun lock it, he would just be a punching man, and he could never close the gap on a brawler. Next up, we have Barley, and Barley just makes a big super. Honestly, I don't think it's really that, like, a punishing super. It does have a good hypercharge, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I don't think this is really that good of a super. Like, it takes 6 shots to get. Barley already deals a decent amount of damage. And right now, he's just spamming out a lot of gadgets. Like, there's no gadgets and star power that relies on his super. So, for me, I'm going to put it in the mid as well. Next up, we have Poco. And Poco's a support brawler. He needs this super. I don't think it's essential on Poco because his attack is wide. But at the same time, he lacks the damage. And he's a support brawler for a reason. So, if you removed the super, he can't heal. So for me, it's got to be essential. So it has to be. Next up, we have Rosa. Rosa's another tank that relies on, or has the super. She has really no way to close the gap, but she does have some gadgets and the speed gear that helps. I don't think it's like essential, like El Primo's, but it's a decent super. Like, it's needed on Rosa. Next up, we have Jessie. Jessie spawns a turret. It's basically the same as Nita's. It is essential. Jessie is a useless brawler without it. Next up, we have Dynamite, and Dynamite's a thrower, but he has a very powerful super. So it's not like he's... Like, Dynamite without his super, I don't think would be that bad, to be honest. But with his super, he packs a very deadly punch, so it has to be decent. I don't think it's essential, though, but it is a decent... It's one of the best supers, though. Next up, we have Tick. And Tick has a super that pretty much fixes a bit of his weakness, and that is aggression. He can throw his head down, and then they have to deal with the head, and if it's a very short-range brawler, most of the time the Tick head's going to hit him, and it's pretty easy to cycle through, so I don't think it's like that powerful. But it helps with his weaknesses, so for me it's going to be good. Next up we have 8-Bit, and 8-Bit is a very interesting one. He has a damage booster that comes down, gives him and his teammates a damage boost, and his gadget and both of his star powers all rely on his super. So if 8-Bit got it removed, he'd be a slow-walking brawler forever with a main attack that's very similar to Colt and just very tanky. So for me, it's got to be essential. It is a spawnable, and a lot of the spawnables are pretty much essential. Next up, we have Rico, and Rico has a very similar super to Colt, where it shoots 12 projectiles. But the thing is, Rico's super deals more damage than his main attack. Colt's main attack deals more damage than super, so it's a lot more punishing compared to Colt's. And it also has insane range, so I don't think it's essential because Rico has a decent main attack, and he's got a good gadget. So I'm going to put it in the good, though. It's definitely more punishing than Colt's. Next up, we have Daryl's, and Daryl right now just sucks in the meta. Like, he needs his super or he can never close the gap, and it also charges over time. So I think it's a decent super. It only fits on Daryl. So, next up we have Penny, and for me, it has to be essential. Penny has a turret. Similar to Jessie, similar to Nita. They all have a spawnable, similar to 8-Bit. Spawnables are essential on the Brawler, because otherwise they're just a main attack feeder, and literally everything Penny's kit, besides the Salty Barrel gadget, relies on the super. Next up we have Carl. And Carl is an interesting one. Carl has a super that does a tailspin and does a lot of damage, honestly, and shreds through opponents. So, pretty good. I don't think it's essential because he relies on that range, but he's good, so I think it's a good one. Next up, we have Jackie, and Jackie's is honestly the first one I'm going to put in pure useless. I think this, or if we're not talking about the hypercharge, like the hypercharge super is good. But Jackie's super by herself, low-key, is just awful. It doesn't really help Jackie that much. Like, it brings the enemies in, but I feel like half the time, that's not what you get with Jackie's super. Like, the way you close the gap with Jackie is you sit in a bush and then just spam your main attack once they get in range. And you have the Counter Crush star power, but you also have the pneumatic booster gadget, which helps. But Jackie's super on itself, I feel like Jackie, if we weren't talking about hypercharge, would be just a terrible brawler. Wouldn't change that much of a brawler if her super was removed from the game, honestly. Next up we have Gus, and Gus is a support brawler. I don't think it's an essential because he's got the Cookie Popper gadget and his overall ghost ability where he can spawn it, but he's got a really good super. He can use it on himself or his teammates to give him a little bit of extra HP. Next up we have Bo. And Bo just spawns a bunch of mines. They're good. Very good for super cycling, but I feel like his main attack, though, is really good as well. So, it's a good super, but I don't think it's, like, decent or essential. Next up, we have Em's super, just as a slowing radius around her. She's a tank counter, so it makes sense. It's really good on her kit. But I feel like half the time you can't really you can't close the gap, and she also has that gadget. So, for me, good super. I don't think it's essential or decent. When we have a brawler like Stu, who absolutely has an essential super, and here's why. One hit to get it, and that's his mobility. He's an assassin, has a normal movement speed, but that is why he moves so much, is because of his super. Take away Stu's super, and he's literally just a brawler that lacks the DPS. Like, Stu without a super is terrible. End of story. Next up, we have Piper, and Piper right now, I would say Piper's super is mid. I don't think it's pure useless, because she has the hypercharge. But I can't really talk about hypercharge because I said that way about Jackie's. But the thing about Piper's super is it at least helps her with her weakness, which is aggression. But you know what else helps her with aggression? Her auto-aimer gadget, which kind of relies on more than her super. Her super she just uses to brag up on the map. So honestly, if we took away Piper's super, I don't think she'd change that much as a brawler. Next up, we have Pam, and Pam's an interesting one, because, like I said, she has a spawner, and I put every other spawnable in the S tier, but honestly, I don't think Pam's is the greatest one. Like, it's a decent super. I don't think it's essential, because the thing about Pam that she does the most is she's good for spamming shots, good for tankiness, and she's got the Scrap Sucker gadget, even though her super relies on one gadget and one star power, but at the same time, like, you use the Scrap Sucker gadget, and both her star powers kind of suck. So I don't think it's essential. Next up, we have Frank. Recently got the rework, and I don't think his super is the greatest in the whole wide world compared to Tank's, because right now his main attack is where the punch comes in, and his gadgets. He doesn't really have a thing. He does have the hypercharge, though, and that's one of the best in the game. But I don't think by any means, I don't think Frank would change that much. His super is still easy to dodge, and it is good for opening up the walls, even though his hypercharge is insanely powerful. But I don't think it makes him that much of a change, so I'm actually going to put it in the mid. Might surprise a couple of you guys, but I don't think Frank would change that much as a brawler. I feel like he'd still be one of the best, even if he got his super removed. Next up, we have BB, and BB is very dependent on her super a lot. It's very hard to build up her super. She has a decent hypercharge. She's got a very fast movement speed, but once she builds up that super, then she can start dealing damage, packing a little bit of damage, and making some cool plays with it. I don't think she's completely essential on her super, but it's a decent super. Next up, we have B. And B, honestly, the thing about her super is it doesn't deal a lot of damage, but it's good for the slow, and it makes hitting her shots easier. She's a tank counter in a way, but since that supercharge nerfed a long time ago, where it made her take 4 shots to get it instead of 3, she's kind of fallen down in the meta a little bit, I will not lie. So for me, though, I'm going to put it in mid. I don't think B would change that much if she lost her super, because the biggest punch by far is with that main attack. Next up, we have my favorite brawler, which is Nani, and honestly, I think Nani's super kind of sucks. I'm not going to lie, because the thing about Nani is it is good against tanks and aggro, where you can knock them back, but in game modes like Bounty and Knockout, where you're trying to deal maximum damage with the autofocus star power, you don't get much value, because first of all, it's pretty easy to dodge the Nani peep. Like, as a Nani main, I barely hit an enemy with it. And if I do, yes, I deal out damage. But it doesn't one-shot. And she can cycle through it pretty quickly. But I don't think, without it, though, I feel like she'd still be a good brawler. Because most of the time, I use the Return to Sender gadget. And Star Powers, I use Tempered Steel, which is good. But at the same time, it doesn't matter. Because every time I use her super, I'm in the back. And I never really hit the super. And if I use it, I'll use the TP gadget in high. So honestly, I'm going to put it in pure useless. It might surprise a lot of you guys, but as a Nani main, I honestly don't think Nani would change at all. Next up, we have Edgar, and Edgar has a super that is essential to Edgar. Like, you can't play Edgar without this super. Sure, you could sit in a bush, but you're never going to be able to traverse brawler to brawler. And you can't play Edgar without a super. Like, it's the thing about him. It's similar to Daryl, where it supercharges over time. The thing about Daryl, though, is it's not as meaningful compared to Edgar's, because Daryl could still, he's a tank. He can push up the map. Edgar has no HP. He has to jump, otherwise he's never going to push up the map. Next up, we have Griff, who has a decent super, deals a lot of damage, but I feel like the main attack is his biggest punch. Now, his super is good for range, so for that reason, I'm going to put it in good. Like, it does a lot of damage. And it's really good against tanks. Next up, we have Grom, who has a very powerful super. It takes a while to get it, and most of the time, I don't even hit it. It does a lot of damage, but I feel like majority of the time, using the Grom super, you'll miss it. It's just good for pressure, but honestly, I think it's mid. I don't think it's, like, that crazy. I feel like Grom is really good with the main attack as a thrower, similar to, like, Barley. Next up, we have Bonnie, and Bonnie, Bonnie's essential, because not only Bonnie has 2 forms, so she has long range form, and she has out of cannon form, which if you stayed in that form forever, unless you died, obviously you'd respawn in cannon form, but majority of the time you don't want to be in cannon form the whole game. You're gonna have to jump onto an enemy, because she lacks the damage and lacks the damage per second, because she only has 1 ammo bar. So you'll jump on a brawler, and then eventually you have to go back into super. If you can never go back into super, or you can never jump out of the super, you're just going to get swarmed by aggression. Next up, we have Gale, and Gale is a tank counter, but right now his super is bugged. So I'm gonna put it in the good though. The thing is, like, if it wasn't bugged, I think it would still be good because it's really good against tanks. It deals decent damage. It's good to push enemies away. It combines very well with the +3 blush star power. But the thing I think that puts it down from like decent is the freezing snow star power. That just pairs so well with his main attack. Next up, we have Colette, and it has to be essential. And here's why. Colette's main attack is decent, but you never really finish off a kill with her main attack. It's with her super. And in Heist, you can't, if you add no Colette super, she's a bad brawler in Heist. There's no other words to describe it. Like, you need Colette's super. That's how you finish off an enemy. Next up, we have Belle. And honestly, I like Belle as a brawler. I think her super kind of is pure useless. And here's why. Her main attack is everything she needs. Her super is pretty challenging to hit. She has a hypercharge that makes her super home on enemies. But regardless, though, her main attack has the bounce projectile, which is very strong. She does a decent amount of damage. Well, not a lot, but she doesn't have anything that benefits the super, really, except for the grounded star power, which sucks. So I think everything in Belle's main attack kit is what's carrying her. So honestly, I don't think her super is that great. Next up, we have Ash, and Ash has a super that spawns rats, and it's a decent super. Like, Ash, without it, though, you can't really cycle that very well, but once you get that rage going with the main attack and the super, then you start cooking. So I don't think it's essential, but it's a good super. Like, it's very helpful on Ash. Next up, we have Lola, and Lola has an ego. Honestly, really good. It's a pretty decent star power. It is a spawnable, but I feel like Lola with the range and her just overall mechanics, I feel like is decent. She has a star power that gives her extra damage as well. I don't think it's essential, but it's a decent super, one of the best in the game. Next up, we have Sam. No words here. Essential. Sam without a super can never push up the map, never gets benefits from the Hardy Recovery star power, no gadget benefit, and yeah, you can't play Sam without the super. Like, it's that end of story. You start the game with the super with Sam. If you don't have a super with Sam, what the hell are you going to do? You're screwed. You can't do anything. Next up, we have Mandy, and Mandy is very, very reliable on that super. I don't think it's essential. It is a decent super, though. It does a lot of damage, and it's pretty easy to cycle through now with the recent buff she just got. Next up, we have Maisie, and Maisie, I don't know. Maisie right now in the meta sucks. It's very hard to hit her main attack, so she's very dependent on that super, to be honest. It's very good for cycling. It's just getting that super. So for me, I'm actually going to put it in the essential. Maisie without her super is just a bad brawler. There's just no other way to put it. Next up, we have Hank. And I would say pure useless, but now I feel like Hank's super actually serves a bit of a purpose. Like, it's really hard to hit the torpedoes fully unless you're directly on top of an enemy. Which, yes, it's very good. But now that it gives Hank healing, I don't think it's pure useless anymore. So for me, I'm actually going to put it in the good. Because it gives him healing. And it actually does a lot of damage. But only if you're on top of the brawler. And next up, we have Pearl. And the way, honestly, I'm putting this pure useless. And there's two reasons why. One is Pearl, the way you play Pearl, especially in how she's played in previous metas and currently, is you build up your heat and then shred people to pieces using that overcooked gadget. Never really is there a time where you use Pearl Super. I guess the only time you would want to use it is if you have the first star power and there's a lot of tanks. Because I feel like half of the time, you shred through the tanks with your heat regardless. And it's very hard to build it up. It is good for opening up the walls, but she has a hypercharge that's so bad. And I just don't think it's that meaningful, honestly. Next up, we have Larry and Laurie. So, might surprise you guys. You guys might say essential. I don't think they're essential because Larry's attack is so easy to hit because it's so big. Like, it's a decent super because Laurie is very strong, but Laurie has been nerfed. So, it's not like essential. Like, on release, I wouldn't even say it was essential because he did so much damage. It was unbelievable on release. So, like, Larry is good, Laurie is good. Like, they're just a mechanically broken brawler right now. Next up, we have Mortis. Has to be essential. You need Mortis super. Otherwise, you're just gonna go in and die. You can't make those good plays with Mortis where you can cycle the bats between the teammates and heal So without it, I'm sorry, Mortis is a awful brawler if he didn't have a super. Next up, we got Terra, and Terra has a very powerful super. Do I think it's essential? No, not necessarily. She's got the gadget, which is really good. Yes, you do need both star powers. Rely on the super, but I don't think it's an essential super. Like, it's a very strong super, but she can make her ways where she doesn't need the super. Now she kind of sucks in the meta, but still. Next up, we have Gene, and Gene, like, he needs a super. Like, it's an essential super because it's a game changer. Like, Gene, I feel like you could put it decent, but just the way you play Gene is you want to pull the enemy to make that game-changing play, and that's what Gene's super is there for. He's got a bad hypercharge, but he's got a super that's just very important. Next up, we have Mac. Nice. Mac. We have Max. Max has got a good super for team synergy, but honestly, if we didn't have the super, I still feel like Max would be a good brawler overall. Like, it's good for team synergy, but you don't really need the super half the time. She has a decent main attack with good range, a good gadget, a good star power, everything you need. Next up, we have Mr. P, essential. No need to talk about it. Mr. P, without it, is just a guy throwing suitcases. Like there's no debate. Mr. P is a counter brawler, and he relies deeply on that super because he can just constantly spawn the porters to waste ammo. Next up, we have Sprout, and Sprout has a super that's good for him, but honestly can de-benefit other teammates, and sometimes even benefit the enemy team if you place this wall wrong. Good super. I don't think it's pure useless, but it's a mid. It's mid. I feel like throwers don't really need the super. They have the other walls. Next up, we have Byron. And Byron has a good super. It gives him healing, and it does damage. It's pretty easy to hit. So, like, it's pretty easy to cycle as well. So I'm actually going to put it in the decent. Don't think it's essential. Next up, we've got Squeak. In my opinion, his super is pure useless, and here's why. It's pretty easy to avoid it. He does have the star power that slows if you hit it, but half the time I never hit it. You don't recharge much if you do hit some. And I feel like majority of the meta for Squeak's past has been reliable on the main attack or his residue gadget, because his main attack with the chain reaction star power used to deal a lot of damage, but you don't really get much value from the super. Next up, we have Lou, and Lou is absolutely essential with that super, because that super is one of the best in the game, not only, but it's so good for zoning for a long time. And if you throw that super in a choke point and somebody walks in it and you got the cryo syrup gadget and they get frozen, you're just going to cycle another super. Now, that's the hardest thing, is to get Lou's first super, but that's why it's so essential, because it's hard to hit his main attack. Next up, you've got Ruffs, and I would say essential because of the power-up, but at the same time, like, if we didn't have a super, Ruffs has the balance mechanic. He does decent damage, and he's got ways to protect him. He's got 2 good gadgets, and then he's got the field promotion star power for cheese. So I think decent is fair. Next up, we've got Buzz, and absolutely essential. Buzz is an unplayable brawler without a super, because he's got no way to close the gap. He's basically just walking, feeding, and what is he going to do? He's got the gadget that gives him a free super, and a star power that helps, and a hypercharge that obviously makes a super incredible. So for me, essential. Next up, we've got Fang. Another one that is essential. Fang is a garbage brawler without a super. He can never push up on the map. He deals little damage with his shoe, and you can't brainlessly spam the auto-aim button for 9-year-olds. Like, what would Fang do? He would be a terrible brawler without his super. Next up, we've got Eve. Now, Eve, the longer range brawlers, in my opinion, are better because they can compete with range and they don't have to worry about aggression or jumps coming into their face. But for Eve, she's got hatchlings that spawn, which are kind of similar to Mr. P's porters. But the only difference with Eve, though, is she has a more powerful main attack and she can go over water. So that's the only reason she doesn't go in the essential. But for me, has to be decent. Why is the thing lagging, bro? Next up, we've got Janet. And Janet's got a super that makes her take off into the sky and drop bombs. Decent super, but I feel like majority of the time you're relying on that main attack and her gadgets. Good super. Don't think it's that great, though. Next up, we've got Otis. And Otis has a good main attack, and he's got a super that just shuts down tanks. I don't think it's essential, but it's a decent super. The fact that you really can't do anything Once you've got it, you're pretty much screwed. Next up, we've got Buster. And the way you play Buster right now, it's a decent super. I don't think it's essential. I feel like Buster, he's got the range, and he's got the slow replay gadget to be good as a tank. But the fact that you can charge it while sitting around your teammates, it's pretty much a needed super. Next up, we've got Gray. And Gray has a portal super, which is pretty good. I feel like Gray, though, would still be a good brawler even without it, because he's got the walking cane gadget. And he's also got a good star power for survivability, and then another gadget to open up the map. But both gadgets kind of do that. But the only thing that doesn't make the thing that puts it in the decent is then you wouldn't be able to have those good team synergies. So pretty much it's the borderline between decent and essential. Next up, we've got RT. And RT, he is a long-range brawler, but I think this one is also decent. I don't think it's essential too, because he's got the range and he's got the hacks gadget to compete. And a decent amount of HP. But he can definitely be countered by aggro, because he's got the Outerline gadget, which automatically switches it. And then he also has a super, which just shreds people to pieces, pretty much. Next up, we've got Willow. And I'm not trying to be that guy, but it's pure useless. And here, this is the only reason why. Willow's super is pretty much impossible to hit. And that's the only reason why. Maybe if they buffed it, I would be like, okay, decent super. It's good mechanically. But it's got so many bugs with it, too, that you just never get value from her super. Next up, we've got Doug. And Doug is a trash can of a brawler, as is. But if Doug doesn't even have a super, he's just Jackie, but can't do anything. Because the thing about Jackie is at least she can close the gap with her gadget. And she's got a star power that reverses damage. She deals a little more damage than Doug as well. If Doug has no super, what the heck can he do? Nothing. Nothing. So honestly, this is just, it's essential. Even though Doug with a super sucks right now. But if he can get the tank trait, then maybe. But either way, you can't push up the map with Doug like you can with Jackie. Next up, we've got Chuck. Essential. No question. He gets an auto-charging super. And he never will get super unless he farms it off of tanks. But the way you play Chuck is you have to put posts down. Otherwise, he's just a guy that shoots smoke. He's got a decent amount of HP, yeah. But at the same time, like, what the hell are you going to do? You're just going to sit there. Next up, we've got Charlie. And Charlie's got a very good super. I don't think it's essential. It is good against tanks, but she's got the Spider's gadget. She's got the other gadget. She's got a decent main attack that you can deal damage with and constantly spam. So, a decent super. I don't think it's essential. Next up, we've got Miko. And Miko is good for that super chaining, but I feel like it's very hard to build Miko super. And most of the time when you land it, I don't hit the enemy. So, it's good for mobility, but I'm going to put it in the good. Next up, we've got Spike. Spike creates a cactus area, which slows enemies that hit it. And it's a good super. I don't think it's decent. Like, I feel like majority of the time you're going to use Spike for the main attack with a curveball star power. And then you've also got 2 gadgets, which are really good, that don't benefit the super. So, that's that. Next up, we've got Crow. And Crow's super takes a while to charge. But it is very good for mobility. It's good for damage. And it's good for pressure. So, for me, it's also good. I don't think it's decent. I feel like Crow without it would be good. He's got the slowing toxin gadget. He's got 2 star powers that benefit the main attack. He's got the other gadget too. Next up, we've got Leon. And Leon is so reliable on his super. Like, I feel like he'd be okay. But for me, it has to be essential. The way you play Leon is you gotta cycle those supers. Your goal is to be sneaky. And how are you going to be sneaky when you don't have a super that makes you invisible? Same thing with Sandy. Sandy 100% is essential has an essential super. Otherwise, he's just a guy that throws pebbles. That's pretty much it. Next up, we've got Amber. And Amber, honestly, I'm going to put in mid. And this is why. The way Amber is played right now is main attack and the Dancing Flames gadget. Like, she has a good super that's good for zoning. But at the same time, like, most of the time you don't hit the super. It's good to burn grass. And you know what? I'm going to put it in good. I don't think it's mid like some of the other brawlers. It's a good super. I don't think it's decent. But right now, Amber really is relying on that Dancing Flames gadget because that damage bug with the blue-red coating is insane. Next up, we got Meg. And the way you put this now is Meg has a very powerful super. But Meg deals a lot of damage as is. But you need the super to go back into mech form. So for that reason alone, it has to be essential. Though, the thing is, though, like, once you get knocked out of mech form, and then you just have to die. But at the same time, like, some game modes, you can't afford to die. So it's essential. Like, if you, like, the super on Rob, which is the robot, if you guys didn't know, I don't think that's really, I'll put that in, like, mid or pure useless. But the fact that you need the super to go back into Rob once you get taken out of it, that's essential. Like, Meg is useless without that. You need that. Next up, we got Surge. If Surge can't level up, he's the worst brawler in the game, no question. So, 100% essential. Next up, we got Chester. And Chester's an interesting one. Honestly, might surprise some of you guys. I'm going to put it in mid. I don't think it's pure useless because he's got some good supers, but I feel like majority of Chester's supers are bad. Like the Pop Rocks one sucks. The Salamiaki one, the Poison one, kind of trash. The Stun one's good. Hard to hit, though. The Bomb one's decent. Does a lot of damage, good for the wall break. And then the healing one is good, heals a lot, but I feel like right now Chester is relying on that main attack and that first star power. Next up, you got Cordelius, and Cordelius, he's essential. He lacks the range. He's got the jump gadget, but he just doesn't deal that much damage, and the fact that you can cycle through supers so quickly with him too, essential. Next up, you got Kit, another one, essential. Kit lacks the range. And the fact that if you can't jump on a teammate to heal them, or you can't jump on an enemy to stun them, Kit literally just scratching his paws. Like, that's literally it. He does okay damage, but how can you close the gap? You do have the gadget, but really, no, it's essential. Next up, we got Angelo, and you might say it's essential. I don't think it's essential. It's a decent super because of two reasons. One, the Empower star power. Two, the poison damage. But Angelo has a very fast movement speed, can go over water, and deals a decent amount of damage as is. So I don't think it's essential, but it is a decent super and does help out Angelo a lot. Unlike Melody, who 100% is reliant on the super. Very similar to Stu. If Melody doesn't have a super, she can't traverse the map. Like, you can never get in her range. She lacks the DPS and everything else. Next up, we've got Lily, and Lily has a good super. I don't think by any means it's essential. Like, it helps her traverse the map. It's very similar to Cordelius, but right now, the way you're playing Lily is you're just abusing the Vanish gadget. Let's be real. That's the main reason. Now, maybe if they nerfed it, it would be essential for map traversing, but the Vanish gadget is the reason. Next up, we've got Draco, and it has to be essential because Draco in base form is not that great. In dragon form, he's one of the best brawlers in the game, but it's just very hard to get it, and sometimes you can be countered. Next up, we've got Barry, who has a very good super. I don't think by any means it's that decent. Like, it's a good super, but right now the way you play Barry is you abuse the heck out of healing your teammates with the main attack, the star power. No, actually, I'm going to put it in decent because the fact that you could cycle through supers very, very quickly is insane. And finally, we have Clancy, who, for me, the way you play in Clancy right now, 100% decent. I don't think it's essential, but it shreds through tanks. Because once Clancy gets to the third... essential. Because once Clancy gets to the third stage, he shreds. He's bad in base 1. He's good in base 2 because the super range is good. And then in level 3, he just melts. He's a melter. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. Let me know in the comments, agree, disagree, what I should change, and I'll see you guys next time.